The rain began before sunset, steady and cold, tapping against the windows of Margaret Lewis's small house like impatient fingers. She stood at the kitchen sink, watching the gray sky press low over the quiet street. At 59, her days followed gentle patterns, but that evening felt different. As if the air itself was waiting for something to happen. Margaret dried her hands and glanced at the clock. 6:40 p.m., right on time. She had ordered a few books online, nothing special. Just something to fill the shelves that still felt too empty after all these years. She did not expect anything more than a quick exchange at the door. Then came the knock. It was firm and confident. Not rushed, not lazy. The sound cut through the quiet house and made her pause. For a strange reason, her heart skipped. She told herself she was imagining things and walked toward the door. Her slippers soft against the wooden floor. When she opened it, she stopped breathing for half a second. The man standing there was young, very young, tall, with broad shoulders and a delivery jacket darkened by rain. Drops clung to his hair and eyelashes. His face held an easy openness, the kind that made people trust him without trying. He looked at her like she was not invisible, like she mattered. "Good evening," he said, his voice calm and warm. "Delivery for Margaret Lewis." "That's me," she replied. She felt suddenly aware of her age, her gray-streaked hair, the lines around her eyes. She reached for the package and he handed it to her carefully, their fingers brushing for the briefest moment. It was nothing. It should have meant nothing, yet the touch sent a quiet shock through her. He held out the scanner for her signature. As she signed, she noticed his hands were steady, clean, careful. Not rushed, not careless. He watched her without staring, as if he respected the space between them. "Thank you," she said. "You're welcome," he replied, then smiled. "I'm Daniel, by the way." She looked up, surprised. Delivery workers did not usually offer their names. "I'm Margaret." "I know," he said lightly, tapping the label. "But it's nice to say it out loud." The rain fell harder behind him, filling the silence. Margaret felt awkward, unsure why she didn't simply close the door and return to her routine. "Bad weather tonight," she said, reaching for something safe to say. "Yeah," Daniel agreed. "But I don't mind it. Makes the city feel slower." She nodded, understanding that feeling more than she wanted to admit. "Well," she said, stepping back slightly, "thank you for bringing this." "Anytime," he replied. "Enjoy your evening, Margaret." He turned and walked down the steps, his boots splashing lightly against the wet concrete. Margaret watched until he reached the truck. Only then did she realize she was still holding the door open. The cool air brushing her skin. She closed the door gently and leaned against it, pressing the package to her chest. Her heart was beating too fast. Her face felt warm. "This is silly," she whispered to herself. She walked back to the kitchen, set the package on the table, and tried to focus on opening it. But her hands trembled. The quiet house felt different now, less still, as if something had shifted and refused to settle back into place. That night, she tried to distract herself. She made tea. She turned on an old movie. She sat in her favorite chair and pretended nothing had happened. But her mind kept replaying the moment at the door, the smile, the way he said her name, the look in his eyes, kind and curious. She felt guilty for thinking about it at all. It was harmless, she told herself. It's just a reminder that she was still alive, still human, still capable of feeling something unexpected. The next morning, Margaret woke earlier than usual. Sunlight slipped through the curtains, soft and pale. She lay still, listening to the house breathe around her. For years, mornings had carried a quiet weight. Since her husband passed away, they had been lonely, even peaceful, but heavy all the same. She made coffee and stepped onto the porch, breathing in the fresh air. The rain had washed the street clean. Everything looked sharper, clearer. As the day went on, she found herself restless. She organized shelves that were already neat. She watered plants that did not need water. Her thoughts drifted back to the door, to the sound of the knock. She scolded herself. It was foolish. He was young enough to be her son. He was doing his job. Nothing more. And yet, when afternoon came, she found herself glancing toward the window more often than usual. 3 days passed. Margaret almost forgot about the moment, almost convinced herself it had meant nothing at all. Then, on a quiet afternoon, she heard the truck outside. The familiar sound of tires slowing near her house. Her heart reacted before her mind did. Another knock followed. Lighter this time, but just as confident. She opened the door, and there he was again. "Hi," Daniel said, smiling as if seeing her was the best part of his route. "Hello," she replied, surprised by her own smile. "I've got another package for you," he said. "You must like ordering books." She laughed softly. "They keep me company." "That's a good reason," he said, handing it to her. This time the conversation lasted longer. Not by much, just a few sentences. A comment about the neighborhood. A question about how long she had lived there. "Almost 30 years, she said. "That's a long time," Daniel replied. "Must hold a lot of memories." "Yes," she said quietly. "It does." He looked at her with gentle curiosity, but did not push. That alone touched her deeply. Most people rushed past silences. He seemed to respect them. "Well," he said, after a moment, "I should keep moving." "Lots of deliveries today, of course," she replied. "Thank you again." As he walked away, he turned back. "See you around, Margaret?" She watched him go, her chest tightening in a way that felt both warm and painful. After that, his visits became part of her routine. Not daily, but often enough to feel familiar. Sometimes he waved from the truck. Sometimes he stopped for a brief exchange at the door. Always polite, always kind. Margaret noticed small things, the way he listened, the way he remembered details she had mentioned only once, the way he never made her feel old or small. At night, she argued with herself. She told herself it was nothing more than friendly conversation, that she was projecting her loneliness onto a stranger. But the truth was harder to ignore. For the first time in years, she felt seen. She felt noticed. She felt awake. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky orange, Margaret sat alone at her kitchen table, staring at the unopened book in front of her. Her thoughts were loud, racing in ways they had not for a long time. She thought of her husband, of the life they had shared, of the grief that had shaped her days after he was gone. She had believed that chapter of her life was closed forever, and yet here she was, feeling something new stir inside her. She did not know what it meant. She did not know where it would lead. All she knew was that the knock on her door had cracked something open, something she thought had been gone for good. Outside, the street was quiet. The air held a promise she could not name. Margaret took a deep breath, picked up her book, and turned the first page, unaware that her story was only beginning. The next delivery came sooner than Margaret expected. It was a bright morning, sunlight cutting through the trees. When she heard the familiar sound of a truck slowing near her house, her chest tightened, not with fear, but with a quiet anticipation. She did not want to admit. She opened the door before the knock finished. Daniel stood there, holding a small box, his face relaxed, his smile easy. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning," she replied, surprised at herself. "You're fast." He joked. She laughed, then felt embarrassed by how natural it felt. She signed for the package, and for a moment they stood there, the air between them calm and open. "You have a nice garden," Daniel said, glancing past her shoulder. Margaret followed his gaze. "It keeps me busy. It shows," he said. "Do you take good care of things?" Something in his tone made her pause. It wasn't flirtation, it was appreciation. She felt it settle gently in her chest. As weeks passed, Daniel became part of her days, not in a dramatic way, not loudly, quietly, steadily. Sometimes he delivered packages. Sometimes he only waved. Sometimes he stopped long enough to ask how her day was going. Margaret found herself waiting for those moments. She planned her afternoons around them without meaning to, told herself it was harmless. That conversation did not equal intention, but intention has a way of growing without asking. One afternoon, the sky turned dark without warning. A sudden storm rolled in, heavy rain pounding the street. Daniel arrived soaked, water dripping from his jacket. "Come in," Margaret said without thinking. "At least dry off." He hesitated at the door. "Are you sure?" "Yes," she said quickly, "just for a minute." Inside, she handed him a towel. He thanked her and stood awkwardly near the door, respectful, careful not to cross any invisible lines. She noticed that too. "You don't have to stand there," she said. "Sit." They sat at opposite sides of the kitchen table. The rain filled the space between them. Daniel talked about his route, about helping his mother, about school he was taking slowly, one class at a time. Margaret listened, truly listened. It's the way she once listened to children in her library. "You're easy to talk to," he said suddenly. She smiled. "So are you." The words hung there, gentle and honest. After that day, something changed. Not dramatically, but deeper. Their conversations grew longer. Their pauses felt warmer. Margaret felt her walls soften, and that frightened her. At night, she questioned herself. She looked at her reflection and asked hard questions she had avoided. For years. Was she lonely? Yes. Was she crossing a line? She wasn't sure. Daniel never pushed, never hinted, never made her feel uncomfortable. And that made it harder. One evening, she spoke of her husband, his name, his laugh, the illness that came quietly and stayed too long. Her voice shook, but she didn't stop. Daniel listened without interrupting. "I didn't think I could talk about him anymore," she said when the words ran out. "I'm glad you did," Daniel replied. "He mattered, and so do you." The words hit her harder than she expected. She looked away, blinking back tears. For the first time since her loss, she felt understood without being pitied. That night, after Daniel left, Margaret sat alone in the quiet house and cried. Not from sadness alone. From release. Days turned into months. The neighborhood noticed. A few smiles, a few looks. Margaret noticed too. She became aware of how the world might see them. The gap in years. The questions that would come if anyone knew. She pulled back for a while, kept conversations shorter, found reasons to be busy. Daniel noticed, but he did not confront her. He respected the distance. That respect hurt more than pressure would. One afternoon, she found a note slipped under her door. Just wanted to say thank you for always being kind. Hope you're well, Daniel. It was simple. Thoughtful, it stayed on her kitchen counter for days. When he came again, she opened the door slowly. "I'm sorry," she said before he could speak. "For what?" he asked. "For pulling away." Nodded, understanding more than she had explained. "You don't owe me anything. I know," she said. "But I don't want to pretend this connection doesn't exist." He looked at her carefully. "Neither do I." They stood there, the truth finally spoken without labels. From then on, they were honest. Careful, but honest. They spoke about boundaries, about fears, about how life rarely follows the paths people expect. Margaret felt alive in a way she had. Forgotten was possible. Not reckless, not young, just alive. They took walks in the early evening when the streets were quiet. They talked about books, music, dreams, unfinished. Daniel never treated her like a lesson or a phase. He treated her like a person. And Margaret never tried to be younger than she was. She brought her years with her, her wisdom, her scars. One night, as they stood on her porch, the air cool and still, Daniel looked at her and said, "I don't know where this goes." Margaret smiled softly. "Neither do I. But I know it's real," he said. She nodded. "That's enough for—" Now, they did not rush. They did not promise. They simply allowed space for something unexpected. and sincere. Margaret knew there would be challenges, judgments, doubts. She felt them already, waiting in the distance. But she also knew this connection had given her something she thought was lost forever. Hope, not the kind that blinds, the kind that steadies. As Daniel walked away that night, Margaret watched him with calm certainty. Whatever the future held, she had opened her door to life again, and that, more than anything, had changed her